During the height of the Roman Empire, the average day's pay for the average soldier or worker was the silver denarius. The denarius was 1/10 of an ounce of silver and very similar to our silver dimes of yesteryear. What I find amazing is the implied value of this coin into our modern lives. This dime of the Roman Empire was the average day's pay for the average worker. It paid for all the living expenses of a man and his family, food, shelter, clothes, taxes, and maybe a little fun from time to time. How would we begin to relate the value of that silver dime to where we are today? First, think about the kind of work a Roman soldier or a field worker would have to go through to get that denarius. Most likely, that Roman soldier would be enduring terrible conditions or fighting hand-to-hand combat. The average worker would be working 12 hours a day using rudimentary tools, doing arduous tasks to eke out an existence. The average American soldier or laborer probably makes the minimum wage of about $8 an hour. If we multiplied $8 times 12 hours the Roman laborers and soldiers would have had to work, that would make the implied value of that silver denarius about $96. If a denarius is 1/10 of an ounce of silver, then the implied value of an ounce of silver is $960. Let's think about. I recently sat down and watched a movie that I had not watched in a long time called Far and Away with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. If you have not seen this movie, I highly recommend that you watch it. The movie starts off with tenant farmers that are slaving away on their landlord's property. They are protesting the raise in rents on their lands. Tom Cruise's dad is killed, and Tom swears revenge upon the landlord. His father's dying wish is that for his son to work his own land one day and be free. Without getting into the whole story about the huge wealth disparity, or lack of freedom, justice, or middle class, Tom and Nicole end up rushing off to America to get free land that America is giving away. The first thing I found interesting was that Nicole's privileged character transferred her wealth from Ireland to the United States in silver spoons. It provided for a lot of value in a very small space. When they arrived in America, they were met with all sorts of problems, including the theft of the silver and a murder. They were plunged into the bowels of society and ended up living in a whorehouse. They finally landed jobs in a chicken factory. There they worked 12 hours a day using steam hoses to take off the feathers of all the chickens. One night, Tom Cruise's character got all fired up and went to the local bar to do prize fighting. He came home drunk, beat up, with $4 in his boot. Then came the one comment that hit me like a rock. Nicole's character said that $4 was more money than she would make in a month at the chicken factory. Factory workers at the turn of the century earned about 10 cents a day back when the dime was 1/10 of an ounce of silver. This dime for 12 hours of hard human labor is the same dime that Roman soldiers used back when the denarius was 1/10 of an ounce of silver. The $4 that Tom Cruise's character won prize fighting was more money than she would earn in 40 days of continuous hard human labor in that chicken factory. It doesn't stop there. We've all heard that 2/3 of the world today lives off of less than $2 a day. That would be the equivalent of less than 1/10 of an ounce of silver. With the mathematically inevitable collapse of the dollar, the fiat Ponzi scheme, all paper assets, humans will be forced to revalue everything that they do and desire. The idea that 1/10 of an ounce of silver represented 12 hours of hard human labor during the Roman times, factory workers at the turn of the century, and even 2/3 of the world today is very consistent. The average baby boomer has about $88,000 in retirement. While we all know that $88,000 is not enough to retire in this paper Ponzi scheme, and that you need over $1 million to be able to live comfortably, or at least replace the income that you would be giving up. But with interest rates so low, even that is not enough. For $33,000, one could easily purchase 1,000 ounces of physical silver. If you value that silver not in terms of dollars, how many days of hard human labor that represents, you can start seeing a different way of life. Each ounce of silver represents 10 days of hard human labor throughout all of history and even 2/3 of the world today. 1,000 ounces would represent 10,000 days of consecutive hard human labor, or over 30 years of work. Think about the historical significance of the average person being able to afford 1,000 ounces of silver. I had studied kings of England who did not have 1,000 ounces of silver in their coffers. In fact, for over 800 years, England had to use a tally stick system to act as currency in their country. During the fall of the Roman Empire, barbarians were at the gates of Rome and said that if Rome could pay 1 ton of silver, that the barbarians would go away. The Roman Empire could not or would not come up with a ton of silver to pay off the barbarians, and they were sacked. Today, that same ton of silver would cost just over $1 million. In the United States alone, there are over 11 million millionaires in the United States. Quite feasibly, one of these millionaires could liquidate their paper assets, retirement funds, stocks, bonds, and real estate, and easily afford 1 ton of silver, that which the Roman Empire could not or would not provide during its time of need. For about the cost of a new car, the average person can go out and buy 1,000 ounces of silver. The historical significance of that purchase is truly amazing. Even if you can't afford to buy 1,000 ounces of silver, think of all the silver that you buy in terms of days' labor. Can you buy 100 ounces of silver? That would represent 1,000 days of hard human labor throughout all of history and 2/3 of the world today. Even if you can only afford to buy 10 ounces of silver, that's 100 days of hard human labor when this paper paradigm collapses. Think about the buffer that could provide you and your family. The best estimates of the amount of silver that I see available are that there are 1 billion ounces of physical silver available. There are 7 billion people in the world. If all that silver was evenly divided amongst all humanity, that would represent about 1/10 of an ounce of silver. But we all know that silver is not dispersed evenly. Silver is being accumulated into stronger and stronger hands, who will not sell this physical silver so long as this paper paradigm exists. For about $2.50, you can go out and buy a mercury dime. Each dime you buy represents 1 day's buffer of food, shelter, and clothing for you and your family. The choice to me is simple. Forgo 1 coffee or beer while times are good and buy a mercury dime, or work for 12 hours of hard human labor during desperate times.